There are many things about the African traditions. There's not one. There are many African traditions, as I imagine most Europeans would reflect that there are many European traditions. And Africa is a very large continent. It is not one country. We need to revisit, I think, the word black. We need to revisit even the notion of multicultural. Now, I don't want to be party political, but today a representative of a major political party suggested that multiculturalism was harmful. I gave at the outset of my comments today an outline of a monocultural world in which I have been a part, and in fact most of us have. Everybody in this room who has any notion of history will have learnt the history not of all white people, actually I think of a class of white people, and even a gender of white people. We don't hear about white women's history. We hear about some white men's history, and that's passed as history of this country. We rarely hear the history of working class white men or women. We hear a narrow version of history, of which I, for one, in the past, have objected that it didn't include me. When I look more closely, it actually doesn't include most of us. And that's not an argument not to have Black History Month. It's an argument to revisit the history of all of the peoples of this country. I don't know if I want to say nation, yeah, I'll say it, of this nation, all of the peoples who have contributed, so that we can understand and respect each other. Not patronise each other, but actually understand the wide contribution of all of the people who live, contribute, work, die for this country. And I don't think we currently live in such an environment, and it's very strange to hear a politician talk about condemning multiculturalism, because the alternative is monoculturalism. The comments that he made, I don't think, could be further from the truth. He argued that by promoting multiculturalism, we, I assume he means people like me, are denying the right of English people to have a culture. And I'd say that actually many of us have done the opposite. I know when I lived in London, I lived in Southwark, and I got the council, encouraged the council, supported and probed the council to celebrate St George's Day. It's the 23rd of April every year. It also happens to be Shakespeare's birthday. And I see absolutely no reason why, if we can celebrate the 1st of March being St David's Day, I'm sorry that to Scots that I cannot remember the date for St Andrew's Day, but there are national days except in England. Don't blame multiculturalism for that. There is absolutely no reason why English, specifically English culture, shouldn't be celebrated. And my argument, in fact, not even at the beginning of Black History Month, my argument many years earlier in fighting racism, I would say to some, I'm not sure I would call them colleagues, some of those with whom I joined battle, if you do not respect your own culture, I do not believe you when you tell me you respect mine. There is absolutely no reason why white British people, or white English people, or white Scottish people should not be proud of their heritage. In fact, I'd say it was vital that you are, because it's a good place to feel confident and enough to listen to other people's heritage. They don't have to be in competition. I want to say a little bit about the word slavery, just because it was mentioned earlier and it's one of my bugbears. can I suggest that there's something wrong with the word slavery and defining people as slaves? It puts on those who were enslaved a label that seems to say everything about them. I think it's much healthier to talk about enslavement. The enslavement of African people did not happen as some automatic spasm. People did it. It was an action done to African people. And the difficulty in talking about enslavement, or indeed even slavery, is that for some, I don't know why, but some people seem to assume that they should feel guilty. Now, I don't know, maybe I hope I'm not being racist here, but I hope it's not some unique white characteristic, this guilt business. But actually, I think it isn't, because I've heard lots of people from lots of cultures be guilty. But it's actually a very unhelpful response to the enslavement of African people. This country was in the forefront of the enslavement of African people. We have to say that France was, Spain was, even Germany to some extent. The Danes were involved, the Portuguese most certainly. The "and" is that it wasn't abolished, by the way, 200 years ago. Only the trade in slaves, enslaved African people were not freed for a further nearly 30 years, certainly 26 years. But the issue of the enslavement of African people is this. There has been no apology for what was a systematic form of discrimination. Frankly, isn't the word, is it? It's genocide in some cases, exploitation, a wrong. We also have to acknowledge that everybody who lives in the United Kingdom today, that's me and you, we are benefiting from that legacy of enslavement. The important point I'd make about class here is that whilst the likes of Mr. Darcy, and I'm talking about the Jane Austen book here, and others had plantations in the Caribbean, those same men were running the factories in which working class people were being exploited. So it can't be seen, enslavement cannot be seen solely as a black or white issue. All white people in the United Kingdom, or the rest of Europe, were not directly benefiting from the enslavement of African people. Some were, most weren't. So to see an argument for apology as being all white people should apologise to all black people is rubbish. It's factually incorrect. It has no foundation, no basis. But an act, a series, a conscious set of actions did happen to African people because they were African, for which no apology has yet been given by the head of state of this country. I don't frankly care whether the then Prime Minister apologises or not. The Abuja Proclamation, which is a grouping of African leaders coming together to look at enslavement, identified and demanded that heads of state apologise. So an apology from the former mayor won't quite do. But I want to reiterate, we have all benefited. All of us in this room have benefited what happened historically. But we were not active agents. And just because your family might trace its roots back to beyond 16 blah, doesn't make you personally responsible for the enslavement that your ancestors may have been responsible for. We have to deal in non-competitive ways with real discrimination that has happened historically.